One of the hardest transitions that people don't often talk about or shed enough light on is the transition of going back to work after being a stay-at-home mom. I recently had a subscriber that commented and asked me to talk about my transition of going back to work. So in this video, I'm going to share with you guys exactly how I transitioned back to work, walk you through my experiences, and share some things that you would find helpful. Regardless of where you are, if you're in the middle of trying to figure it out, or if you're considering going back to work, or if you're just curious, I believe this video is going to help you. And my goal really in today's video is I want to approach it from a different angle where I really want to give you guys really in-depth detail so that you have an accurate idea and accurate understanding in terms of what to really expect. I'm not just talking about all the fluffy, cute things about going back to work, because it actually can be really challenging. And there are a lot of things that I think should be considered and that you should think through as you're navigating what this decision may look like for you and your family. If you're new here, my name is Isa. I'm a wife, mom, I love Jesus, and I homeschool. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a few years, and I recently transitioned back to work full-time after being a stay-at-home mom. And really, I'm excited to talk about this because I literally just went through this. So let's go ahead and jump in. So there's so many reasons as to why we arrive at the place of, okay, we want to go back to work. Regardless of what that reason is, it's completely okay. Do not let anybody shame you for wanting or desiring or exploring going back to work, because every family's needs is so different, and you are in tune with what your family needs. And if this is something that your family needs, it can be temporary, it can be permanent, it can be short term, who knows? But just don't feel shame if this is where you're at. So for me, before I made the decision to go back to work, I remember for the longest time, I never even entertained the thought of going back to work. I had a period of time where I grieved my career because I loved what I did. I loved the company that I worked for. I was making great money and I was doing so well. And I felt like I was on such a great trajectory in terms of my corporate career. And I felt like as I was kind of climbing and at the peak or almost at the peak, I started growing my family. And at the time, the best decision was to pause that and come home. I grieved that part of my life. It was like I was holding two things. On one end, I had so much joy. I was so grateful. I loved being home with my kids. I loved seeing the fruit of my, hard work and investment and sacrifice, and just kind of loved what that season brought out of me and, what I was able to pour into my family. And on the other end, I still was grieving what I felt at the time I worked so hard to build towards. So I wrestled through that for about a year and a half, I believe. And then after that, I was okay. I was settled, I was comfortable. And at that time, I had just started to fully embrace all of the season of what being a stay-at-home mom entailed. And I loved it. And at the time, I was also homeschooling and doing other things. So I felt occupied, and I tried to be purposeful in different ways to fill whatever void that I was feeling from no longer being able to work professionally. So in my mind, I couldn't reconcile how I would be able to work in homeschool. And I knew homeschooling was something that we were called to do. So I remember when I did start thinking about and considering finally, okay, maybe this is something that I can do. I remember still wrestling because I'm like, I don't know how I can do this. Like, can I do this? So I struggled with, am I still going to be able to show up in my home in the same way? I had built such a great system, great rhythm, great routine for our family. And I felt, am I still going to be able to uphold that and work? Am I still going to be able to be effective in homeschooling in the same way? Will I miss everything, right? Like, what would my day-to-day now look like? And then I started to think through what the sacrifice and weight of that would be. So I thought through all of those things for some time, and it was a lot to process. The thing about it is, nobody talks about how motherhood changes you, right? Because when I first was working, I did not have any kids. So my goals, my ambition, that was so different, right? And then you come home and you're fully present with your children, and you're seeing the fruit, and you're seeing the seeds that you plant develop and grow, and you're seeing everything come to fruition in terms of your sacrifice and all of that. So like after witnessing and that being your experience and you being transformed by that, and then deciding to go back to work, you don't go back to work the same way. You don't go back to work as if you didn't experience or as if motherhood didn't shape you the way it has. So for me, even deciding to go back to work, I knew it was going to look so much different now because I have been shaped so much more different from being a stay-at-home mom. Like, I cannot negate the impact of what motherhood has on me and who I am now as I go back to work. I went back knowing that I'm not the same person as I was before. Hopefully that makes sense. So the hardest part about going back to work after being a stay-at-home mom, it's not about learning your job again. It's about carrying two identities with you. So like I said, I was not the same this time going back to work compared to the first time. And for me, knowing how to carry these two identities was something that I deeply cared about. I wanted to be able to show up at work, to be excellent, to give it what I have, and to do it well, to steward it well. And then I also want to be able, when I'm home, to show up well, to do it well, to not let like my home sink and things be in shambles because I'm working, right? And also when I'm at work, recognizing that I have to show up in a certain way because there's already a stigma with moms and all the things. Now, I do know that even though for me, when I show up at work, the goal is to give it my best and be excellent, my excellent for that day might be 60% because that's all I got after staying up, after making dinner, after X, Y, and Z, right? That's all I got. I got 60% today, and I'm gonna give that 60%. So for me, I really just wanted to be able to navigate these two identities as best as I can. Because the reality is, I'm not just a working professional, I am a mother, okay? I am a wife. I love my family, and I'd rather be with them than be here, okay? But it's just what I have to do at this point. Another surprise that I felt early in the beginning is I did feel a little bit of guilt in the beginning because when I went back to work, because it was such a transition, I had to scale back in terms of homeschooling hours and our cadence. And I wasn't I wasn't able to give the amount of hours that I used to give when I was fully home to homeschooling at the time because when I first started working, the training and just all of that required so much time. So I was craving and just ready for that training and those early phases of reacclimating yourself to work. I was ready for that to be over so that I can just have my time and flexibility back. But during that period, I felt guilt because my husband had to take up a lot of space in terms of homeschooling, jumping in to do certain lessons with them, taking them to co-ops. So he had to do a lot during that time, and I felt like my presence with them wasn't the same. So I felt a little bit of guilt about that. So what I did was I constantly invited conversations with my kids. I constantly brought them into what I was feeling, what was happening. I communicated the transition. And thankfully, I was only in that space for about a month. And then after that, I was done with all the training stuff and I was able to have more flexibility over my schedule, which made a huge difference. The next surprise that I had after going back to work is I underestimated how much confidence I actually lost. Okay. The thing about it is, while I was home, I ran businesses, I did like side hustles here and there. So I felt like I was still using my skills because I didn't want it to be dormant, right? So I felt like I was still doing things here and there. So I felt like because of that, I was good. But y'all, when I went back to work, I quickly realized that my confidence was not there in the same way. And it was really hard to see that. So I remember I had a tough time and I'll come home with my husband and I'm like, because the thing about it, y'all, is I went from being home and talking to my children all day, okay? When you're home, a stay-at-home mom, you're talking to your children. So it could be toddlers, it could be infants, I don't know, but you're talking to younger people all day long. All right. So you're not really being stimulated or challenged in the same way. Like the only adult that I would talk to maybe in a period of 24 hours would be my husband, or maybe if I'm on the phone or something. But it's like casual conversation. So I was in that space for so long that I realized when I went back to work and I'm in that corporate professional setting that my confidence wasn't in the same way because I'm just used to looking up things around sleep training, meals, this leap and this milestone. What do I need to know? What do I need to do? Like, I'm used to doing all the mommy things and I'm so familiar with all the mommy language that now I have to be in this corporate setting where I have to demonstrate leadership. I have to demonstrate confidence. I have to demonstrate ownership. I have to demonstrate taking command. I have to demonstrate speaking in authority. You know what I mean? Like, so it's so different. And I realized during that time, like, man, I don't feel as confident in this area right now. And it wasn't because I wasn't capable, but the reality is motherhood really humbles you in so many ways. You're changing diapers, you're reading bedtime stories, you're doing bedtime routine, you're doing naps, you're making dinner, and now you're suddenly expected to jump into meetings and act like none of that happened, act like none of that was your life for the past few years. That's a hard switch to make. And during that time, I had to remember that, like, the skills that I developed at home, which is being patient, being understanding, being a great listener, being able to problem solve and kind of just think quickly on my feet when things happen. Those things actually translated into my work more than I realized, right? But now they look different because now I bring those things from an aspect of actually having experienced it and doing it. But now, how do I present these things in a way that fits the culture and fits the environment? Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's transition into the things that helped me and the things that I found very helpful in this transition. The first thing I stopped doing that helped was I stopped trying to recreate my old life, okay? Because before I came home, I used to be very competitive at work. Like, I want to be one of the top 5% in terms of performance. Like, I would stay late. I would be just so invested into my work because I really just wanted to do it well, and I really just love growing, and I actually love what I do. So I guess that made it easier for me. But I realized I can't do that now. Like, I just can't. I stopped saying yes to everything and I started creating boundaries, okay? And now I look back cuz now I have coworkers that they're single, they have no kids, and they can stay there to however long. They can do all the things, right? But I look at them and I'm like, man, I used to be that person where I would do this, I'll do that, I'll stay later, I'll say yes to everything. But now it's like I cannot go back to that because my life now looks so much more different. So that's just not attainable for me. So I had to kind of recognize this and know that I can't go back the same way that I did. And this was very helpful because it helped me to put up boundaries. Obviously, what I do is very flexible. So I'm working remote some days, I'm going in some days, I'm leaving early some days. So I can kind of tailor my schedule to, different times of the day, but like, I'm not pressed to reply to an email within a certain amount of time unless it's very important. Like, I have the ability to disconnect and put up those boundaries now, and before I didn't. I had no concept of what that was before. The next thing that helped me was I accepted that balance changes in every season. Like, I accepted that every day for me looks different, and that's okay. Like, every day for me looks different. Some days I'm working remote and I'm homeschooling and I'm making dinner and I'm doing all the things, and it sometimes feels easy on certain days, right? And then there's some days I'm working remote and I have so many meetings and I have a full day and I have to figure out that day, right? And then there are days where I have to go into the office and I have to stay longer, and there are days where I go in and I come in earlier. So for me, I've accepted that every day looks different, and I actually love that about what I do because I get to be a part of creating what every day may look like. I enjoy the flexibility and I've embraced the fact that no day is going to look completely the same. But my goal, and really what I tell myself, is how do I show up today and how am I prepared? How am I getting in front of it? How am I being proactive so that I can make the most of whatever each day entails? The next thing that helped me is the power of quality. Quality. Okay. When I am home with my family, I tell you guys, I am so intentional about ensuring that our time together is quality, okay? And I'm able to plan things in advance and really protect that time. Another lesson that I learned is that I realized that going back to work did not mean I had to give up the family life that I've worked so hard to build and invest, and the culture within our family that we worked so hard to cultivate over the years. I did not have to give that up. We still homeschool, we still protect our mornings. I'm still home and present for every extracurricular activity, every event, or just whatever we have going on during that day. The only thing is things just look a little different now, in a sense of I have to be more intentional and I have to be more proactive in terms of planning and being on top of things. So I can't just kind of let things happen. I definitely have to be proactive in planning and getting in front of our day in terms of things that we have to do, things that we have going on. If you've been following me online for any period of time, you know that I'm always advocating for women to have a side hustle, start a business, like exercise and use your giftings, your talents, multiply what's in your hand, what the Lord has given you, right? While I was at home, I started so many businesses, y'all. I had my marketing agency that became like a little coaching one-on-one where I did strategy call with women to help them in terms of their business ideas. I became a doula. I did a lot of online courses. So I was always about getting better, learning, growing, adding to my knowledge, exercising my gifts and my talents. And just, I've always been about that. So I've always loved that. And I never saw myself just being home and just that's it, because I just have so much interest and there's so many things that I'm so passionate about. So I say all that to say that because that's always been my bent and now I'm able to work and do what I love and enjoy corporately and professionally, and then still be able to be present with my family and do all the things in terms of our culture, making memories, just all of that is such a blessing that for me that the Lord has allowed me to go back to work in a way where it hasn't robbed or taken me away from or removed me, but I'm able to do both. I'm able to have both coexist. The only difference now is I have to be proactive, I have to be intentional, and there is some sacrifice. Like I have to go to bed early, I got to wake up early, like I got to be on top of it. Every second of my day matters. So if you are a stay-at-home mom and you feel a little scared about going to work, maybe you've been a stay-at-home mom the whole time, or maybe it's been so long, maybe you don't feel as qualified, maybe you're in the middle of just trying to figure things out. I want you to know that it's okay to grieve the season that you're leaving. It's okay to grieve the fact that you have to come home from working, and it's okay to grieve that now you may have to leave home to go back to work. It's okay to grieve those two things depending on where you are. I think grieving is okay. And I think in some ways it's healthy. Like being able to properly process the effect certain life changes has on you is okay and it's needed. So give yourself permission to do so wherever you are on the spectrum. Your next season is not going to look like your previous season, okay? So you have to accept that if you do go back to work, you are a different woman. If you've been home for some time, you're going back into work and you have to relearn and you have to regain your confidence, right? That shouldn't scare you. If anything, it's like, okay, this is a challenge and Lord, equip me for this, right? And then that's where you really depending on the Lord comes in. Because the reality is, if you're a stay-at-home mom, your day-to-day looks so different. And now you have to make the switch into working, which is two different things. So give yourself grace and recognize that this is a space for you to bring the Lord in so that he can guide and lead and give you the grace and the wisdom and insight and everything that is needed for you to, make that adjustment well. When you do go back to work, you get to become a new person. You're going back as someone who's been stretched, someone who has grown, someone who's evolved, right? And you have a different type of resume. You're going back as someone who's grown, someone who has evolved, right? Like you bring a lot of new, refreshing things into work now as you make this transition that you didn't before. You also go back as someone who is capable of deeply loving and serving their family while also working, right? So again, these two identities and figuring out how to navigate them daily is a new thing now that you now have to learn. I hope this video was helpful. I did not mean for it to be this long, but if you made it to the end, let me know where you are in your process. Are you in the middle of making the transition of going back to work? Are you in the early phases of trying to think it through and consider if it's the right choice? Would love to know where you are in the process and just share more encouragement as needed. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Thank you for hanging out with me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe, hit the like if this encouraged you, and I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye.